I like using metaphors for how we are doing simple things in life just because it can make things more fun. Somehow making life feel more interesting that when we're doing those mundane things. And a lot of that in self-development is there's a lot of boring actions, taking care of ourselves, working out and doing work. It's not always going to be very exciting and stimulating, but it is part of a great project of making a better life, making a meaningful life. And so that is a big thing. That is a fun and stimulating thing. So it can be useful to find ways to make those connections so we can feel like what we're doing in the little day-to-day moments is connected to this bigger thing. And I find one metaphor that works really well for personal management of life is thinking of yourself as a country. Imagine that you are your own country. Of course, it could be a city, province, it could be any kind of organization. You could imagine yourself as a corporation. Even the word corporation comes from the word for a body. Imagine that all the different parts of you are like the parts of this organization. I find this especially comes out when there's kind of internal disagreement, when I feel conflicted inside. Maybe different parts of me want to do different things. I'm having trouble deciding between going in different directions. And then it seems like it's a lot like what would happen in a political disagreement inside a country, or perhaps a disagreement in management direction inside an organization. So it can be interesting to imagine whenever you have this kind of a deadlock or there's some kind of an internal conflict, to imagine this as what would it be like if this was a political situation where you have different people within society, different groups, different actors in the political arena that are kind of at play inside yourself. So of course, think of the classic conflict between, should I work hard doing the things that I believe I should do, or should I relax and have fun at the moment? This is the conflict that seems to keep coming up, of course, over and over. So you could think of it like different forces inside yourself. You have this political faction that is very much about it. It has its particular vision for how it wants you to be. So this would be like this kind of a self-development faction that's all about, you want to improve yourself. We want you to get better. We want this country to change in these particular ways. So they have set ideas about this is where we're going to go. And of course, that faction can also have its own debates and conflicts within itself as to what specific policies of self-development, what particular directions it wants to go. You can have like the leadership convention inside a particular party, even though they're together one political faction, but they're still having fighting within themselves. And then another faction would be this kind of, I want to enjoy myself right now faction. They are against this idea of this self-development vision because that does not seem like it's really worth doing. And they would argue that if you push this self-development too far, you're simply trying to run yourself like you're a machine, and you're not going to be able to enjoy life. And we're here to enjoy life, so let's enjoy life right now and not put it off. That would be their campaign. This political faction, they are about having fun right now. I can feel that internal debate happening when I think, it would be really fun to play a video game right now, maybe watch this YouTube video, but then I have this to-do list of things that I should be working on that aren't all that fun. That's what I should be doing, but then here's these fun things that I could be doing instead. So there's the battle of who wins and gets control of my will and my action. So you could imagine it like a political debate, maybe like in a internal parliament, where you have the factions arguing with each other and making their case. And now, as to how the decision gets made, that depends on how you arrange your internal government. So you could make it like a democracy and sort of have this majority rule effect where the voices with the greater number are the ones that will prevail. So you can have a debate in Parliament, campaign, they will argue what is the best way to go, try to convince the voters, and then all the different parts of yourself will kind of make their choice. Should I do the boring work or have fun? They will then make their selection. On the other hand, you could arrange your system like an aristocracy where you have a certain noble class, a certain faction that is automatically in power so that they would simply ignore the side that would be arguing against their plan. They are the nobility within yourself, that you have this particular part of yourself that you hold to be the ideal leaders, and therefore they are the ones who will direct your policy and everybody else has to follow along. And at the top, this monarch, the internal king, deciding what to do, giving the final say on policy. There could be like a council of elders, a council giving advice and deciding the best way to go. These respected leaders in a council advising the king, and then the king making the decision, this is what I will do. Or at the extreme, you could have a total dictatorship where you simply have the autocrat, the boss, who simply decides from the top, this is the program, everybody else follow along. And of course, each of these systems has its own issues and limitations. With the democratic approach of listening to every part of ourselves and deciding based on the majority, we have the advantage of really, in a way, listening to the people, listening to the parts of ourselves, and giving a voice to everything inside us. The disadvantage being that the people may not decide to do what you really believe is the ideal thing to do. There may be some elaborate plan, policy developed by these elites, but then the people decide, no, they would rather do something else, and so they do something else. Sometimes called populism, when people in a democratic system vote in a way that is not appreciated, or at the extreme, mob rule, where every part of ourselves simply clamors for what it wants, and there can be internal chaos. On the other hand, the aristocratic, autocratic, the elite system where power is held only by the very top and the rest of the people simply must follow along. There is the strength, the advantage of being able to develop a more detailed and considered and planned policy, because there is a smaller group arranging everything. Instead of simply everybody saying what they want, there is a small group saying what they want, and they can make a program. For example, this self-development program laid out by this internal elite that says, this is what I believe we should do. But the disadvantage being that it is this very small group that is setting the policy. So it may not be policy that is good for the whole of the body. Maybe what this elite wants is not what the rest of the people want. Maybe they're just setting policy to please themselves and wanting everybody else below them to just follow along. Whether it's a whole aristocratic class, whether it's a council of advisors, whether it's a pure dictator. And ultimately, in the extreme case, if the top rulership is not able to run the body and make the necessary decisions to keep the whole body working, then there can eventually be full revolt. If this little group in control, making all the decisions for everybody, gets more and more removed from the body as a whole, it eventually becomes its own little alien group that is trying to control everybody, but becomes further and further removed from their reality until eventually they're no longer able to maintain the order, and all the people below simply rise up and topple the head and say, no, we will take this no more. We will set up our own leadership. So I think this metaphor works really well for showing that dynamic between you can make decisions for yourself about how you're going to behave, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. But that doesn't automatically mean that you can do it. It doesn't automatically mean that you are going to follow those policies that you set for yourself. So for self-development, the mob rule approach might be something like, I'll do it when I feel like it. When enough of me feels motivated to do this thing, enough to vote for it, you could say, when enough of me decides this is the right thing to do, then I will do it. Until then, no, I'll do something else. In other words, I'll do it if and when I feel like it, says the mob. And at the other extreme, the decrees of the dictator or the ruling council, you can just decide, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. every day, run 3 miles, meditate for an hour, do 6 hours of continuous work, then have my breakfast. You may have a whole detailed program of how you decide is the best way to carry out your day. In that extreme example, it's easy to imagine how quickly it would come to a state of rebellion. How long would you be able to keep up that program? Wake up at 4 a.m., run 3 miles, meditate for an hour, do 6 hours of continuous work, and then have breakfast. How would you do at carrying out such a program? That sounds like the program of a dictator who has completely lost touch with the people, lost touch with reality, just has a vision in his mind of this is exactly how I want things to be, and I expect everybody to follow along. But even in far more moderate programs, where we decide this is going to be our daily schedule, I mean, sometimes we just don't feel like it. And that's like the people grumbling. The people are grumbling. They know they have to follow this policy, but they are not happy with it, and they're starting to strain. You can sort of feel that internal strain where the limits of patience are being strained, and you don't know how much more you can do it. You need some kind of break. That's where possibly the ruler could bring in the old bread and circuses approach. Keep the people fed and entertained so that they are just appeased enough, just satisfied enough that they continue doing what is expected of them. But of course, pure bread and circuses, the people just want more and more bread and circuses for less and less effect until eventually it doesn't work anymore and they overthrow the policy. That would be like the moment when you just say, enough of this, I give up. I'm going to eat some junk food and play a video game today. I have no more of this program. I'm sick of it. So there's that delicate balance between directing the people in a certain way, ruling them with a certain policy where you expect everybody to behave in a certain way, and yet the rulership cannot decide to do anything, cannot just make people do whatever it wants. There is a kind of internal dialogue and a compromise and a balance between these forces inside us. And that's why I find this a really fun way to look at internal dynamics. So I'd be curious to hear if any of you also tried this way of thinking about your internal dynamics. What does your internal government look like, and how are your internal politics going?